Reminiscences. I think it has a much better word in Tamil, Malarun Ninevugal. I want to start with 2-3 small remarks. And this being an Institute of Mathematical Sciences, there will be always temptation to be very rigorously accurate. But I think it has to be tempered with the fact that this is a formal occasion of remembering nice things and enjoying in those memories. So I think it will have to be tempered with those considerations. The organizers have told me that each speaker will have 10 minutes. But I cannot have a buzzer go off at 10 minutes and this can become unpleasant. So there will be no buzzer, but I will request the speakers that let it be observed within an error bar of 1 minute. And as a supplement to that remark, I want to add that there are big plans to make available a longer and fuller version of your reminiscences to everybody. So, with those remarks, may first call upon Professor Matthews to say a few words.
No, you can get the hand mic for this.
Another I think important instruction the organizers had given me is to request with some sternness that these cell phones may be switched off or muted, because I think the organizers told me that in the morning session cell phones were having a parallel session. So I want to remind you either to switch off your mobile phones or mute them.
Visit to Ramakrishnan at his house in 1952, soon after my graduation from Madras Christian College, was a totally unplanned event. I happened to go to the campus of the Madras Christian College to visit some of our professors there before taking leave of them, leaving the campus altogether. And one professor, P.S. Srinivasan, told me, there's one bright young man, or he didn't say bright young man, very bright person who is now holding a reader in the university, who is giving fantastic lectures in mathematical physics. And I think with your attitudes, you should go and see him and see what you want, whether you want to enroll with him for research or whatever. So I went there, his house. He was a strapping young man of 29 at that time. And when I reached there, he was out playing tennis. And he came back after a short time in his tennis shorts and all that. And I was totally taken aback because he said, reader. I had never heard of what a reader was. And I thought it was something super professor or something of that kind. I expected a gray-bearded gentleman. But here he was anyway, and his voice could be heard a quarter of a mile away. So he came and asked me, what are you here for? I said, I'm interested in mathematical physics and things related. I would like to see if I can join with you as a research student. Well, he said, I'll give you a problem. You go and try it. If you succeed in solving it, okay, you'll be my student. If you don't, doesn't matter. You may not have succeeded with one problem, but there'll be a number of other things you can do. And it so happened that I was successful in solving that the same night. Next morning, I presented him with my solution. He said, asked me to go and come back the next day. And he was profusely appreciative when I did go back the next day, and he said, well, you are going to be my student. At that time, university had not started taking any students in the physics department. The department had just been formally started, but waiting for the head of the department, Dr. G.N. Ramachandran, another great scientist, to come from Bangalore, the Institute of Science, and then join here as head. So I had to wait. This was in May I had joined, and I had to wait till October for Ladi to come back, and then he recommended my name for admission, and it took to the university, the way they process things at the university. It was December before I got admitted. Well, I have to acknowledge my gratitude to Dr. Ladi Ramakrishnan profusely. He was saying a little while ago that I think it was Krishnaswamy Ladi, that the greatest thing that a teacher can do for a student is to give him a good problem. Now, he had a profuse supply of problems, good problems, one could work on. And so, in a matter of a couple of years, I had already worked out a number of things. And the solution that I had given to him on the first day was useful for him also for a publication of a paper relating to Chandrasekhar's work on astrophysics. Okay, and since then, I have had an extremely good relationship with Ladi. I mean, he was very protective. He was extremely helpful in every circumstance. I asked him whether I could. I had applied for a job in AIR, and he said, well, go if you want. I won't stop you, but I think you will be better off here. I did go, attend the interview, got selected, but I came back and joined Ladi again. So this went on, and I got my doctorate, and then I moved off to other places. By the time I came back in '59, I had also been appointed reader in the Madras University. Thanks to the efforts of Ladi himself, he informed me by telegram, those days, no telephone, nothing, by telegram which itself took some days, about reader's post which had just become available, and he asked me to apply by telegraphically make an application, because there wasn't any time before the deadline. And I applied, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I got a reply. This was from the university. You are appointed reader. No interview, nothing. And from then, I joined Madras University. The department buildings were just about ready, and we started functioning from the Basic College of Technology. And of course, then came 1960s. This was 1959, and then the theoretical physics seminar was going on, and I used to attend the seminar till the institute itself was started, and things went on from there. So I must acknowledge my deep indebtedness to Ladi for basically for my career. I am happy that the institute has come up so magnificently. I must also remember Dr. S.K. Srinivasan, who was the second student with Ladi, and he was totally devoted to stochastic processes. I strayed away from that subject soon after my PhD, soon after my postdoctoral, even before my postdoctoral. Soon after I completed my PhD and went abroad, I had shifted to other fields, and I have continued shifting fields, and finally I ended up with geophysics. That's another story. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you once more.
Before I call upon the next speaker, I want to make one more remark. We have time till 3:30. The original list of speakers given to me is 7. Now it has become 11. So please make your own judgment that these 10 minutes itself is actually really the upper limit. Otherwise, we will be sitting here encroaching the next session. Now I call upon Professor Devanathan to speak a few words.
Do you want me to come up? Isn't as a politician sighting anyway? Thank you. Good, thank you. Well, let me first thank for this, allowing me to make this unscheduled talk. Well, Professor Matthews was his first student of Professor Alladi. I was one of the earliest students of Professor Alladi. It was in the year 1959. It was a Sri Ramanavami day. I just walked into his house. He was coming out with a tennis racket. He said, we shall go to the Mylapore club. He said, I will play one set and then we will discuss. So afterwards he said, let us have some coffee at the canteen, at the Mylapore club canteen. And while we were there, he said, today is a Sri Ramanavami day. It's a very auspicious day. Why can't we start formally the theoretical physics seminar? He said that you can just go to the Bank of Baroda, which is next door to Mylapore club. He said, we open an account on theoretical physics seminar. That is how it happened. Well, the theoretical physics seminar was not an accident. It was a necessity. He was a professor at the Madurai Center, and he was permitted to run the MSc Theoretical Nuclear Physics course at Madras, and he had no venue to conduct this course. He said, my house is palatious and we will have the course conducted there. That's how, there was a batch of about 10 to 12 students, Dr. Bhamadi and Balachandra, they were all in that one. So there was a sizable group, and he was shifting his interest from stochastic processes to particle and nuclear physics. And he said that everyone should give lectures. He assigned me angular momentum and nuclear physics. Myself and G. Ramachandran took that. And others, other areas. So we were exposed to a wide area in that. In other words, we were trying to pull ourselves by the bootstrap. There's a bootstrap mechanism we had. Well, this has also encouraged us to think in original way, and then you take out your own way. People will find they have taken to different topics of research. And so it was a very good one. And I also tried later on in my own thing with my students. Well, Professor Alladi Ramakrishnan, I say he has built up a big group at that time. And then he invited a large amount for, visitors. Those were, for instance, Dr. Abdul Salam, and then Professor Bohr. They came for the Indian Science Congress, and then invited them to Madras. Professor Abdul Salam, he said that he will take him as his home guest. And many of the visitors were his home guest. And the theoretical physics seminar was only, hosting them. They were the personal guests of Professor Alladi at his ancestral home, and the theoretical physics seminar was hosting them the dinner at the New Woodlands Hotel. This was the thing. Well, this gave an exposure, a good exposure to all his students. without any infrastructural facilities offered by the institution. Well, at that time I will say the motto, I mean it is given inscription there, you will find that science is at its best when it is a part of a way of life. And it was truly the spirit of theoretical physics seminar. Dr. Krishna Samayalawadi has spoken at length about the theoretical physics seminar, and there is no need for me to repeat them. And everybody in this audience knows, and thanks to Dr. Indra Chowdhury, who is putting it in the historical perspective. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor Devanathan. The next speaker is Professor A.P. Balachandran.
Okay. Oh. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I was among the first batch of appointees at IMSc in 1962. Okay. If my memory serves right, among this first group of people who were appointed was Vasudevan and Ranganathan, both of whom are no more. Then Radha, T.K. Radha and Tunga. Okay. T.K. Radha, I believe, is somewhere in Canada, in Edmonton. Regarding Tunga, I do not know. I know that she was cited some long ago in the United Nations, but then I do not know what happened. However, my own association starts much earlier, in 1958, when, just like Matthews, immediately after passing from the Madras Christian College, I should say I was pretty confused because there was a lot of pressure on many of us to go into some canonical career like engineering, which I did not want to do at all. Okay? And then appeared an ad in the paper about theoretical nuclear physics. I didn't know theoretical nuclear physics from a hole in the ground, but it looked a good possibility. So we joined. I just simply joined. I did not want to go to TAFR. It was a strange land for me. I am from a small place in Kerala. So I joined, and I knew Chennai because of MCC. So I joined Alladi. So as Krishna mentioned this morning, we used to meet regularly at Alladi's house in Egamranyavas in Leicester Road. Okay. And it was some kind of a version of, you may say, Gurukula Parambara, you can say that, no? But not quite, because the reality is that none of us knew what we were doing, okay? And it was a kind of a self-strap activity where we taught each other. Okay? After it's a lot of determination and a great, tremendous confusion, we kept going. Okay? The reality is that those confusions have faded away to be replaced by new ones, and that appears to be the fate of people who are engaged in research. Okay? But anyway, okay, my association again started after George came here as a director in '83. Okay? And just to recollect what the situation there then was, we were housed in Besant Nagar near that Urur Alcott Kuppam school. We were housed there, and every morning we will be brought here, bus here, okay, by a driver whom some of you, at least if people like from CMI, like Balaji were here, they will remember, by somebody called Chellakutti. Okay. We were afraid of him. I was afraid of him. The rumor has it that at one point he tried to knock me down with the bus. Okay. That is a rumor. Okay. So Chellakutti still, I believe, is around. Okay. Charles was already there. Charles was today serving food in the canteen today, and he is still working here. Okay.
Chellakutti's son is with us.
Yes, I know. I didn't want to mention. Okay. Okay. And it was hot. My goodness. There was no air conditioning, and we were working in the front building. Okay. And it was really hot. Only fans were there. And if it happens that we were visiting, I was coming here sometime in May or something. I used to come here for some time, okay, and somehow we survived those days. Okay. I felt the heat. I mean, MCC, I did not feel the heat, but by that time, the body was getting sensitized to these issues. And the food was served not in this fancy way, but there was a small, on the first floor in the front building at one corner, there was a small place where some tiffin was served, okay, with severe criticism from some of my colleagues. But anyway, okay, that was the situation here. Okay. Academically, I should say that the collaborations I started at that time, for example with Govindarajan, who may be in the audience, has persisted consistently down to this day. Okay. And it has been very valuable. We have produced, I think, quite a lot of work. And also at that time, I remember that Shyam Ganesham Date, Ramesh, who may also be here, we used to meet regularly during those visits in that front building in one of the halls next to the director's place. Okay. And we did start some work which still seems to me very well. It is at that time we were looking at some formulation of string theories, and it still seems somewhat interesting, but I suppose that all of us lost interest in string physics, so we abandoned it, or maybe our contacts sort of declined. Okay. On the other side also, personally in my formation, at that time some of our best work was done with George and Mukunda, and that work done so long ago is, I consider, very valuable in my own experience, and it is coming back in the context of understanding what is meant by entropy in quantum physics, not the Boltzmann entropy, but entropy in quantum physics. It seems to have quite different meaning than what we understand by naive activities with Boltzmann entropy. There is also a very sad memory of Meera. Some of you may know her. Okay. She was a student here for a short time, very extremely enthusiastic, and she used to come, and at that time people were talking about solitons and homotopy groups, and she and somebody called Shaji, who was a student of, I think, TRG here, we used to discuss it again in that same hall in the front. Unfortunately, at some point Meera went to University of Philadelphia and got murdered. Okay. It is a very sad story. She stayed hardly a few months there and she got killed. Okay. And there has been a Meera memorial going on in Bangalore for now quite a few years. And I also remember lectures by mathematics people, Lakshmi Bai, I don't think she is here, Shravan Kumar, we used to go always with a water bottle, okay, and he talked to us about, both of them I think talked about affine Lie algebras and Kasmudi algebras, but never mind. Since then, so that is a picture that working conditions, the infrastructural conditions were not very good. Okay. It was too hot. I mean, Madras is a hot place. Okay. So it was too hot. Nevertheless, there was there was the beginning of something happening. Okay, I should say, faculty was being hired. Some good students were coming and so forth. Okay. But since then, there has been a tremendous change. Okay. The very striking change, surely one of the striking changes in the infrastructural, if you look at the infrastructure, is totally different now. Okay, so many buildings and hostel facilities there is completely different, and the faculty diversity is also quite impressive. Okay, it is now spreading over very different areas. Okay, okay, and so it has become in effect an important center of learning in India. Okay. Now I want to complete, I don't want to go on reminiscing like this. In fact, Shyam threatened that he'll throw me out after 10 minutes. Okay? He was repeated, okay. It's something like Jayalalitha getting thrown out of the NDC in 10 minutes. I'll be out. So I better finish. Okay. I remember, I mean, this subcontinent in this larger context certainly has had a traditional learning from a very distant past. Okay? One thinks of 5th century BC of Takshila and Nalanda, all kinds of things. And Abdus Salam, whom I knew quite well, okay, he had a passion, a zunoon for promoting science in third world countries. He used to talk so much. And one of his standard quotations was about Al-Andalus in south of Spain, in Andalusia, okay, about Cordoba, at the university in Cordoba under the Moors, and how people from the northern part of Europe, he used to quote some written material coming from England somewhere, but people were coming from Norway, I don't know what, all the way to Cordoba to study. Okay. So their tradition was not confined to a small coterie of Western people doing science. It was already, the idea of pursuing knowledge was very much diffuse in many other parts of the world. Okay. Nowadays we also talk about the Kerala school. Okay. I hear a lot about this Kerala school of astronomy and mathematics. What is it, Nilakanta Somayaji and all kinds of people. So clearly there is much that we can remember. Okay. With these memories to support us, it is my hope that the institute itself will grow even more faster into a committee of scholars, okay, community of scholars with an engagement with knowledge and curiosity about nature that are without frontiers. Okay. I hope that people will not say that I do LSC physics, so I don't know anything about quantum information. I don't think that this is the way to do physics. Okay. Or same thing for mathematics. Okay. Now, if some of you might have read about Marx, okay, Marx's 1844 philosophical manuscripts, where he talks about the contrast between the bee and the architect. Both can build very beautifully, but what is the difference between them? Okay? And how he says the quest to understand nature, change it and be changed thereby is what puts us apart from most other sentient beings in the world. Okay? Now I think that IMSc has been contributing to this quest, and we can hope that it will do so, continue to do so I should say, with even greater vigor and intensity in the future. I think I'll stop here.
The next speaker listed here is Professor G. Ramachandran, who lives in Mysore. Unfortunately, he couldn't come. My colleague, Professor M.N. Murthy, has agreed to do partial compensation, but that is only as far as reading out his text, but he said not to the level of going to the short one is on behalf of his.
Professor Ramachandran is not well, so he sent me a short write-up and he requested Date to give him an opportunity that it be presented in this meeting. And I'm very happy to do that because I think Ramachandran is an extraordinary individual, not just from personal interactions with him. The way he has gone about interacting with college teachers and outside of this research institute system in a university, interacting with so many scholars and others in small colleges and small universities. And I think apparently, in the last count must have been 20 PhDs, and all these teachers are continuing their research in their colleges or wherever they are working. I think it's an extraordinary achievement. I'm happy to read his recollections. So he thanks by beginning thanking Ghanshyam Date. It's in first person, so I'll read it. I was at IMSc in the first 3 years of the institute, during which I was given an opportunity to give a course of lectures on the quantum theory of angular momentum and to assist in guiding Dr. K. Anantanarayanan and late Dr. R.K. Umarji. The work with Dr. Ananta was appreciated by late Professor Schiff. While the work with Umarji led me later to the realization of what Murthy and I referred to as non-oriented spin systems and to the beautiful SUN representations proposed by us. The early work carried out by Professor V. Devanathan and myself here on photopion production motivated me to formulate a new method during the first decade of this century to derive multipole expansions for photoproduction and electroproductions of mesons with arbitrary spin parities at higher energies in collaboration with Dr. Vidya and Dr. Balasubramanian. These new results specialize exactly to the corresponding CGLN expansions in the particularly simple case of pseudoscalar mesons. The exaltation that research is best done when it is part of a way of life by my teacher, late Professor Alladi Ramakrishnan, has all along influenced me. The frequent meetings with eminent scientists, which were highly inspiring, right from the time I joined as a student, was given an identity when he created the theoretical physics seminar on Sri Ramanavami Day in 1959. I was a member of theoretical physics seminar from its inception. Apart from the tireless work and the emotional attachment to the cause of theoretical physics, we contributed money too in the form of membership fee paid every month and additional payments for dinners and buffet parties without exception. I also had the privilege of giving a course of lectures on nuclear physics to the first batch of MSc nuclear physics students, comprising of Professor A.P. Balachandran, Professor Jima Bhamati, Dr. T.K. Radha, and Dr. R. Tunga. Finally, I wish to record the advice within quotes, "You have taken a step forward, don't take it back," end quote, given early in my life at a very difficult time by my father, late Gauravaram Venkatakrishna. It was crucial for my continuation in research, which was given a new life by the great scientist, Dr. C.R. Rao, and my dear friend, Dr. B. Ramachandran, at the end of my tenure at Mat Science. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Murthy. Now I request Professor Bhamati to say a few words.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. My son.
This bag also goes with it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'll just leave it here for a minute. I first wish to thank the organizers of this wonderful event for giving me an unscheduled opportunity to make this little remarks. And I feel particularly happy about it because I am also one of the founder members of the Theoretical Physics Seminar. My introduction to Professor Ramakrishnan did not come so personally as it did to some of the earlier speakers. I had finished my MA in physics. In those days, BSc honors could also be done by 2 years BSc and 2 years MA, as it was called. And I had some friends, and all of us were wondering what we would do next. And one of my friends, the late Dr. Indumati, she told me, look, they are starting a new thing in theoretical physics. And Dr. Ramakrishnan is going to be teaching that. He's going to be organizing it. And he's a great friend of my uncle's, so I think we should join that. And so that's what really motivated me to join. The fact that I was going to have my friend join. We had both done our BSc together, so I knew her, and so I thought it would be fun. And by the great sheerest coincidence, Dr. Radha and Dr. Tunga, of course, at that time they were just T.K. Radha and R. Tunga. Tunga was 1 year my senior. They also decided to do theoretical physics. So we all paid our fees and went to AC College of Technology. And what were we told? Professor Ramakrishnan is no longer here. He is going to be in Madurai. So you guys have a chance of, guys and girls have a chance of doing some experimental physics with Professor Ramachandran or make your choice. We were very worried, but then fortunately we met Professor Vasudevan there, and then he said, no, Professor Ramakrishnan has been appointed to Madurai, but the course is still on, he will be coming here and so on. So we pinned our hope on that because for some reason, all four of us wanted to do only theoretical physics and not experimental. Much as we knew about the fame of Professor Ramchandran, we still wanted to do theoretical physics. And once we joined the course, it was a one-year MSc Theoretical Nuclear Physics course, and that's when one of the teachers was Dr. Ramchandran, as Dr. Murthy mentioned. And at that time, since Professor Ramakrishnan had to shuttle between Madurai and Delhi and so on and so forth, many classes were conducted by his students who were all advanced level. So I remember Professor Vasudevan giving a course on electrodynamics, Ranganathan giving a course on, in fact, the subject was somewhat abstruse. We didn't even know what it referred to. And Dr. Ramchandran gave some lectures, Dr. Devanathan gave some lectures, and so the course went on. And of course, Professor Ramakrishnan himself then gave at Ekam Srinivas a course on Feynman lectures. Feynman had mimeographed lectures on electrodynamics, and that was our introduction to that. And I must say, to cut the long story short, I must say the things that we enjoyed most in the first place was, it was a very unusual situation, as many of you may know, that there were 4 women all at the same time in the same course. Women did not take so much to physics in those days, maybe math, maybe humanities, but certainly not physics. And it was a great bit of good fortune that we were together, because we really needed to be together and to be supported by each other's knowledge and interests. And we used to attend these classes. We all took down notes. There were no textbooks. There was only one book. It was Bethe and Schweber on field theory. And that book was taken away from the library by research students, and we had no access to it. And we were supposed to be examined on all these topics. So all 4 of us used to write notes furiously and sit and mix and match and make one common set of lecture notes. And that's how we did our final exams. After that, of course, it was quite clear that we all wanted to do PhD together too. So we went on, and as Dr. Krishna as well as some others have mentioned, the infrastructure was very limited, and also there were, other than Professor Ramakrishnan, there were no other lecturers. So we all essentially learnt most of the subjects in which we did research by the bootstrap mechanism. Somebody was assigned a topic, and they would go and find books, read, and come and give a lecture, and 1 or 2 or more, and others similarly followed suit. But the great advantage for us, for which we were all eternally grateful to Professor Ramakrishnan, was that the invitation to many, many foreign visitors. Each one of them had a different topic. It was a different subject. It was all not coordinated, nothing. But nevertheless, the advantage was it exposed us to so many different topics, which even in a regulated course in a big university, we might never have been exposed to. And so this was our way of doing things. And one way or another, we were rather successful at it. And all the students that joined along with me and a little bit after me, I think everybody managed to learn something and finish their PhDs in appropriate times, and of course went on to new pastures and so on. And to the best of my knowledge, almost all of them are doing very, very well. So that was my initial association with theoretical physics seminar. And I was, just for the record, I was temporarily a member of Math Science 2 as a student. And of course, then for a variety of reasons, my path was different. But I'm extremely happy to be here today, and kind of surprised also to see myself on the stage. I didn't expect to be a part of the Reminiscences, but I'm happy to do that. But I also wanted to emphasize this one additional point, is that it was a very unique event that there were 4 of us women at the same time. One cannot call it an encouragement for women to join, nor a discouragement, but it was just, I don't think there has been that kind of a group either before or after, both in math science and in elsewhere in the country. And I'm glad, for another reason for being on the stage, is that I'm the sole female member of this entire series of talks who is able to represent the female side of Indian physics. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Bhamadi. Now I call upon Professor Srinivasa Rao to speak. I would like to invite Geetha also for a while. But only if it's not there in the list, but I see it there. Only half an hour.
Sir.
Double chalk போடலாம், but extra time.
இதுக்கு
Extra time.
எடுக்க மாட்டேன்னு சொல்லுங்க. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to stand before you and speak to you for a few minutes. I'm glad that Professor M.R. Srinivasan is here and the former directors are here present. I have had probably the longest innings in this institute, in the sense that when I was in Presidency College, I was a student of Presidency College from 1962 to 64. So the first time I saw something about the institute was that the Institute of Mathematical Sciences used to have its classes in the first year MSc classes where our classes were conducted. So there was a small plaque, which was a teakwood plaque on which the Institute of Mathematical Sciences was painted, and on the door of that small block, which was a new block there, this was screwed one day. So by the time I joined, it was August that I joined there. So this was put, I think, I do not remember whether it was already there when we went there or not, but I used to see this board, the Institute of Mathematical Sciences, written there. And all the Institute of Mathematical Sciences people used to come and assemble there only in the afternoon, because in the mornings we would have our first year MSc classes. So when the classes were over, we would go to the lab for the afternoon experiments, because I was MSc in physics. So we would all go for the classes there, and then we all knew that there were a group of people who were coming and having their lectures there. But we did not have an opportunity of sneaking and seeing what was happening there, because these were two different places, and therefore I do not know what they were doing, but I knew certainly that this was happening. And the other manifestation of the institute was that there were Godrej bureaus which were bought there, and these were being stacked with very good books, and these were under lock and key. And there used to be my senior, I think by now names have been mentioned. My seniors are G. Ramchandran, Devnathan, K. Raman, K. Anantanarayanan. These were my seniors at that time. I mean, the earlier generation were all theoretical physics seminar people, but I think these people were the people who were there. And I always used to wonder what this guy was doing, because this friend of mine by name K. Ananta, he's still a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends, I should say. He used to sit with his legs on the other side. I mean, he would not sit properly. He would sit in that way and he'll be reading like this. So I thought theoretical physics people are eccentric people. Is what I used to think. One swallow doesn't make a summer, but this guy was somewhat different. And we later on became very close friends, and I'm thankful to my seniors, because the first person who asked me to do something was how I came across Professor Ramakrishnan. Well, I finished my examinations on the 30th of April, and I took about 1 week's rest because I had to relax, and I had done my practical exams on that day. So I had done the practicals well. The next day I got the information that I was going to stand first in the class with 79% marks, so this was leaked to me. So I knew that I was definitely going to be a first class, and probably I will be getting a rank. The reputation which the institute had at that time was Professor Ramakrishnan does not take students if they do not get any ranks. So I thought that I would probably at least definitely get a first class, but then I was surprised when I got a rank, and I stood first in the Presidency College, and that means other people did not do as well as I did. And
So I went and met Professor Ramakrishnan 1 week afterwards. Professor Angappan was a teacher of mine, and he recommended me to go and see Professor Ramakrishnan. So I went and met Professor Ramakrishnan in his house. And the only questions which he asked me was, how did you fare in your school? What were your marks in your school? What were your marks in your pre-university? What was your marks in your BSc? What will you get in your MSc? I said, I am expecting to get a first class. There was another good coincidence that my father, who was a reputed lawyer in Madras at that time, and we were living in Kapaleshwar Sanjay Street in Mylapore, a very big house, which according to some was like the Salarjung Museum with a billiards table, and my father had even a revolver license and all that. And somehow my father was inducted into law by Saraladi Krishnaswamy Iyer. So when I told Professor Raladi Ramakrishnan that my father is a lawyer, then he asked who inducted him or something he asked, and that somehow the cat was out of the bag that Saraladi Krishnaswamy Iyer had inducted my father to the bar, introduced him to the bar. So that was how the start was. Then he asked me, well, what are you going to do now? I'm having vacation. I said, what are you going to do at home? Go to the library. The library is open. You can come and use the library from now on. So I think after about 1 week after my final examinations, I started going to the institute. That was in May. I now looked up only recently to see what date it was. I think it was the 11th of May 1964, which was a Monday, because I remember going there on a Monday. And he came there and he asked me, he only gave me the book of Feynman on fundamental processes and Feynman on quantum electrodynamics, and he said you should read these books. And then G. Ramachandran used to come very late in those days. I mean, Professor Sudarshan very jovially said about several people and their timings and all that. And here was one gentleman who used to come only at about 3:30 or 4 in the evening. And from 4 he will stay there till about 7:30 or 8. And he found that we had the same lingua. So the lingua connection was there. I was a Telugu and he was a Telugu speaking person. So he asked me, what are you doing and all that. And I told him, I want to get, I'm interested in nuclear physics. Somehow nuclear physics interested me because of the nuclear models and things like this, in which I thought I was good. So then he said that I should he will teach me something, and that's how he started teaching me angular momentum at that time. And I'm happy that in course of time I've established myself in that particular field. There were quite a few good things which were happening at that time, in the sense that big people, I mean people like Victor Wieskopf, I mean whose names were very well known, and director of CERN, he would come. Every year Professor Ramakrishnan would go on a tour, and he would come back and call all of us and tell all the places where he had been, where he had lectured, whom he had met, and things like this. And somehow it was sort of, we would call this as, I mean all the seniors, like Professor Vasudevan, Professor Ranganathan, these names were mentioned to you. Balachandran was already out of the institute at that time. Therefore, the only seniors whom I knew were Professor Vasudevan, Professor Ranganathan, and a few years later, Professor Mariwala had come and joined. And so I was about 10 years junior to them. And we all used to have a very good time talking about various things which were happening there. And when I do remember on one occasion, Harish Chandra coming and giving a course, giving 1 or 2 lectures there. And it was on Lie groups and representation theory. And he had written on the 6 boards, he had written from this corner to that particular corner, and I was completely lost. I mean, it was completely at a different level. So I went and asked my seniors, in the Tamil I said, did you understand? They said, we are also in the same boat, we also did not follow. So I thought I was not badly off, if that was to say. And I was encouraged by my teachers. Particularly I am thankful to Professor P.M. Matthews, who found that I had learned by myself. Paul Roman's book was the best book which I found from where I learned group theory. Somehow in course of conversations I happened to mention this, and Professor Matthews encouraged me and asked me to give a course of lectures on group theory at the theoretical physics department. And Professor Devanathan, of course I should mention that Professor Devanathan and G. Ramachandran, these were the 2 people who had written a series of papers in the Nuclear Physics Journal at that time. They had given a lot of formalism, but they had not compared anything with the experimental data. So there was a person who came as a pool officer at that time. Unfortunately, that gentleman is now no more. His name is Chandrakumar Nair, S.C.K. Nair. He was a student of Professor R.J. Blindstoyle at University of Sussex. He came and he got interested in, we got to talk to each other, and there were a group of 4 or 5 of us who used to spend time till about 6 o'clock or so. We got permission from Professor Ramakrishnan to keep the library open till about 6 o'clock. So Ananta Narayanan, S.C.K. Nair, me, N.J. Deshpande, and another student by name S.K. Singh. The five of us were used to spend quite some time together, and in the evening we will go home only about 5:30 or 6 or something like that. So that is how I got inducted into this. And one more fortunate circumstance in which I found myself was that I do not know, I used to tell people, even right now I tell people that I do not know how my writing on my forehead is, but my handwriting is good. So in those days all the theses have to be filled only by hand. And the first person who discovered this to me as soon as I went and joined was K. Raman. And K. Raman had a thesis which was about 450 pages long. And the first copy and the second copy have to be filled. All was completely mathematics. I did not know. They were all alpha, beta, gammas and mu, news and things like this. But they said that you have a good handwriting. All the seniors found out that I had a good handwriting. So they asked me to fill all those theses. So I filled a lot of mathematical sciences without understanding it. But slowly it seeped into me. And these people were very nice to me. Ananta, for instance, had also another problem. That we had to punch cards. I mean, I am one of those, as was pointed out by Professor Sudarshan, I was one of those persons who was early introduced to the computers. And so when we used to sit in front of the deck of cards, my good friend Ananta, he would waste 10 cards before he could get one card right. And if one punching is wrong, if you put one finger wrong, then the card has to be discarded. So they found that I was good at all those things. So these people used me. And so my first paper which I wrote in Il Novecento in the year 1966, I did all the numerical, I mean I would punch the cards, learn the language from him. Numerical integration was the only thing which was involved, and the rest of it was computation. So you learnt a lot of units and things like this, used the Chu, Goldberger, low number amplitudes as they were called. I learnt it from them. And I did all this programming, and I used to go and submit the cards, get the output, and then draw the graphs and all that. At that stage again, I am very thankful to Professor Devanathan, because after the IBM 1620, this was the first computer in Madras. The first computer in Madras was the IBM 1620. Today, you can see the remnants of this in the Periyar Science and Technology Center open to the skies. I can still see the card readers, the line printers and things like this lying around there. Then came the 1130, and then came the 370, and I used to go to the Tata Institute to do my work on the fundamental CDC 3600 computer. So I did the first breakthrough came to me when I did work on, Professor S.C. Nair told me if you can find a closure nucleus for which there is experimental data, then we are in business, because he had the thesis of a person called Vincent Gillet from Saclay, and that was in French. But he said, don't worry about the French. What we need is only the particle hole formalism. I will teach you the annihilation, creation, operator formalism, particle hole formalism. So you are in business if you can get this. And then I looked up, and lo and behold, there was an experimental result for oxygen 16. So Professor Alladi Ramakrishnan used to call me as oxygen for a long time, because my first paper was on oxygen 16, and this paper was published along with 4 authors. Professor Devanathan helped me in doing the numerical computation. Part of it was done in Virginia when he was at University of Virginia, because I wrote to him. I sent him all the expressions and things like this. He said everything was right, but then I was not able to do the computations here on the 1620, which was too slow. So he helped in doing the computation. So my first paper, which was of class, which was published, was the paper with Devanathan, Srinivasa Rao, S.C. Nair, and Manki Ro, a Korean mathematician who contributed something to another type of wave function, and therefore that paper appeared in the Nuclear Physics Journal. After that, I got the idea of publishing a single author paper. Somehow I got the impression that a single author paper is the one which is necessary for be all and end all of existence at the Institute of Mathematical Sciences. So I did a little bit of work which I included in my thesis, and I published a paper on carbon 12. And when that paper was published, I said that this experiment should be done. That experiment was done in Soviet Union, and they put on their experimental data the theoretical curve of K. Srinivasa Rao in a particular model which I had used. That was the first time when I hit the roof. When I went and showed this to Professor Ramakrishnan, he said, well, very good, excellent, what you have done is very good. Now next what? You must go abroad. So he told me one day, even if you have to sell your last shirt, I would like you to go abroad and come back, then only I can do something for you. So I did take it as gospel. I did make my first trip abroad in the year 1972, and then subsequently, thanks to this wonderful institute where the facilities were so good, the library was excellent, and everything was improving day by day. And as you see today, we have almost all the facilities which you can ask for in anywhere in the world. All those facilities are available here. But we built something at that time. When Professor Ramakrishnan used to say that if you can get a good book there, buy it, we will pay it. The library will pay for that. So I used to buy some books by Eisenberg and Greiner, Eisenberg, these kind of books which I used to see I used to buy those books and bring them here. The next day, he would pass the bills, and that is how the library has been built. And all of us should be happy that we have a regional library today, thanks to the way in which books were acquired by Professor Ramakrishnan at that time. So I am very thankful to this institute for what I am today is only because of this institute. There's a lot more. I have had, as I said, 38 years of continuous association with this institute. I have a lot more to say, but we are short of time. So thank you.
Thank you, Srinivasa Rao. It's really a heartfelt thanks. You know, Srinivasa Rao has so much to say. Younger people must know that he can go on for hours like this. But yeah, he can go for hours, but it's my personal request that he has reasonably stuck to time. Now I would like to call upon Professor Sridhar.
Thank you, thank you. First person on the stage to talk and who is not a student of Alladi Ramakrishnan. I am a student of Professor Vasudevan, who was a student of Professor Ramakrishnan, and Professor Vasudevan is no more, and probably in some sense I may represent Professor Vasudevan, who is up above. I was a student of IIT in the first batch, IIT Madras, and my teacher was Professor S.K. Srinivasan, who in turn was a student of Professor Alladi Ramakrishnan. Therefore, from my student days, I have been associated with Alladi in some form. And during 1964, the anniversary symposium of the institute was celebrated in the Presidency College, and we were all asked to attend the symposium. Our classes in IIT will be cut. All the classes will be cut in the afternoon, and Professor S.K. Srinivasan will come along with us. We will all go in a bus, change 2 buses and go to Presidency College and attend the symposium. And Professor Rosenfeld, who was the editor-in-chief of nuclear physics, was the chief guest, and one Professor Barucha Reed, who worked in stochastic point processes, was there. And we used to attend the talks. Even though I did not establish any contact with the seniors at that time, we just go there, attend the lectures and come back. The only contact was SKS. And during my MSc Viva and MSc project, Professor Vasudevan was the examiner, and he somehow took a liking for me. And also there was another friend of mine, one Mr. Sundaram, and both of us came here, and on the recommendation of Professor SKS. And when we met Professor Alladi, he said, well, you have been recommended both by Vasudevan and SKS, therefore I am taking you. Even if you get a second class in MSc, I don't care. You just come and join. For him, class, and he told me also that he had already taken somebody with second class and they have been doing very well. For him, only the performance matters and what you achieve is not important. And we joined the institute. For 3 years, the institute was not recognized by the University Grants Commission, and it was also not recognized by the Madras University. Therefore, the first 3 years of work was not at all recognized for the PhD thesis. For the university said, what all you do after 1967 alone can be included in your thesis, and whatever you have done before that period will not be included, will not be considered. For that was a big handicap for us. Therefore, the institute was recognized in July 1967, and whatever work was done after that, Professor Srinivasa will vouchsafe for that. We had really suffered for 3 years, and it went on like that. And well, things went on, and there's a few things which I would like to say. Professor Alladi used to say, whatever you have to say, if you think it is important, put it in writing. It need not be published. At those times, there was a culture of preprints. For we used to call what is called math science preprints, and whatever you say, you put it in writing, cyclostyle form, and he will allow us to send it to a few people abroad. And airmail was not allowed, only by sea mail. And only thing that you can send by airmail is your paper. For we used to write everything. And instantly I used to say, Professor Ramachandran's lectures on angular momentum, it was insisted that it should be put in printing. And we had made cyclostyle version of G. Ramachandran's lectures, and 100 copies or 200 copies were taken, and they were sold at a nominal price of 5 rupees. And the lectures were all sold out in 2 years, and if you want to have one copy of lectures on angular momentum by GR, it was not available, and therefore it was again taken and sold. In a similar way, myself and Professor Srinivasa Rao gave a set of lectures on nuclear physics and nuclear matter, and those lectures were also have to be reprinted, and they were also sold like hotcakes. But even now nuclear physics and those things are out of fashion now. There's no use for that. And another thing is, whenever Professor Ramakrishnan comes to the lecture, it used to be a nightmare. And before you start a lecture, you should give in 1 or 2 minutes what exactly you want to say and why you do this and what is new. In just 2 minutes or 3 minutes you should say, and then only proceed. Go on beating about the bush, he will get up and give good banging. Or if he is there on the lecture hall, one has to be very, very careful. And another thing is, whenever somebody sends a paper for publication, he or she should give a talk before it is sent for publication. Because now the relationship with the teacher and student nowadays is totally different from what it was there. That their teacher is so powerful, the research guide is so powerful. And everybody in the institute has to sit through the lecture. You cannot say, I am not interested in the topic, and in that way. For the lecture, the paper has to be presented before it is sent for publication. Similarly, if you go for a conference, after you return from the conference, you should give a seminar as to what is it you did in the conference, what was the general coverage, and what was the highlights of the conference. Those things should be presented. It is a very important thing. That was a culture which he insisted. And another thing he says, he was very particular about financial things. Simon, I will finish in 2 minutes. Thing is, when the institute wanted to buy one van, it was discussed at the secretariat at the highest level. And apparently, the secretary told the director that if you buy a van, that van will not be for the institute, it will be only for the director. Then he made a promise to the secretary that I will not get into the van. And he did not get into the van. It was kept. And whenever he gives a talk somewhere outside, he will go in his car, the students and others will follow his car in the van. That type of discipline he had. And another thing, whenever there is a lecture, whenever it is over, when people go out, they all go out without switching off the fans. And he will sit in the hall, switch off the fans and go. And he is very particular that things should not be wasted. And such a type of discipline and culture he had.
No expense account?
Yeah, there was no expense account also. Whenever there is some guest or somebody comes to the institute, gives him a talk, all the faculty and students should share the expenses and the guest will be treated. But there is no expense account, no car for the director, no quarters for the director, nothing. That type of thing. But now things are different. For one cannot compare that is right and this is wrong. See, things change, evolves, and evolution is part of our life. For things have to change as they go. Anyway, with this, let me stop and let me thank the organizers for all the opportunity.
Thank you, Sridhar. I call upon Professor Mariwala.
Okay.
I know much, so give me a signal.
I should give a signal?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know much.
Okay. best.
I am first among the speakers this afternoon who was not a student of Alladi Ramakrishnan. I heard about Alladi Ramakrishnan first in 1960 as a person who works in stochastic processes. Then I met a lovely group of ladies in 1963 in Washington, D.C., who said they were students of Alladi Ramakrishnan. And I felt he must be really a powerful person, a powerful scientist to attract such lovely ladies. Later in 1965, I suddenly decided to return to India. And Professor Sudarshan suggested that India is not a place where you can get a job just like that. You should not be going back like this. And I should try here in Madras. But somehow, since my home is in Bombay, I went there. I had already written to Baba before. But by the time I reached there, Baba was no more. Anyway, I contacted Menon, and Menon said, we only want people who work in S-matrix theory. Actually, those were the days when S-matrix theory was on the way out. But this just shows that how institutions are bent on some subjects they want to pursue without a vision. So I joined IIT Bombay, and I came to Madras only as a tourist. And I was passing on this, what is called Sardar Patel Road. There was a big board, Institute of Mathematical Sciences. So I just sauntered in. It was located on the third floor of a building. As you come out from Sardar Patel Road and cross the VHS, you will see the first building. That was the building in which the institute was located. It consisted of one large hall and a small lecture hall. And that large hall just had bookshelves, and people were sitting within those bookshelves. I was surprised that people there had heard of me, at least from my work. And this kind of impressed me. And Alladi, I found, was a very powerful speaker, and a person who was very outgoing in the sense that he wanted the world to know about science. Even his methods, for instance, if there was a lecture, it will appear in the Hindu columns of today's program, so that the world outside knows that there exists a thing called math science and where some work is going on. Dr. Srinivasan mentioned about contact with public, or to inform public about science. I think Alladi Ramakrishnan was a master of that. He would continually see to it that information about the institute's work reaches the public. Whether the public knows any science, but they will at least know that there is something called Institute of Mathematical Sciences and they are doing some good work. Unfortunately, in India, we don't even have any journal like Physics Today, in which even scientists can discuss things with each other, far from contacting the public. I think the problem that Dr. Srinivasan mentioned is really that. Scientists writing in Hindu is perhaps, I don't know, that's a very effective way of doing it. They should first at least discuss things among themselves. I think Aladi understood this point. In fact, that was the reason he kind of resisted takeover of the institute by Department of Atomic Energy. He felt that an institute should be financially independent of strings. For instance, Institute of Mathematical Sciences was getting finances from CSIR and from Department of Atomic Energy. And he wanted to keep things going that way. It is true, to some extent, he was very much impressed by going abroad. And this training is very good for people to go abroad. But somehow I think he overdid it. Every year he would go abroad. And he would encourage others also to do so. I think we should also continue to do things sitting here. In fact, that is why I came back. I could have stayed on abroad and need not have come back to India. And if you look at my work, it has been always done independently by myself only. Now, in particular, let me mention two things. I joined in 1967, and then I went away back abroad. And I came back in 1970. And it is in 71, Aladi became interested in special relativity because of the conference which he allowed me to organize. At the same time, there was another interest in the institute due to Krishnaswamy Aladi, because he came of age and he wanted to do number theory. But the point which I want to make, that special relativity as such, or general relativity as a subject, I introduced it here, remaining within India. The second point I would like to mention is the institutional structure in India. See, before Baba came on the scene, there was CSIR and UGC. Now, the way the situation is, Department of Atomic Energy dominates every field. And the people, whether it is in UGC or in any other branch, the people from Department of Atomic Energy is there. I think that's not really very good. The problem that Dr. Srinivasan mentioned, in that context, I would like to say that we do not have a scientific community to decide on these matters. If only we have people from Department of Atomic Energy saying that this is so or this is not so, that is not enough. We need a scientific community. And I think Simon is already up that I have.
Already here, I come further.
Okay. So I'll say thank you to you all.
Thank you, Professor Mariwala. Now I'm going to call upon Professor Pathasarathi.
Oh, winter title. Thank you very much. Good evening. As Sridhar mentioned, I am the grand student of Alladi. So I have written it up, but where is Simon? Oh, I won't take more than the allotted time. My association with the math science was from 1969 to 73 as a PhD student in the University of Madras under Professor V. Devanathan, who had his PhD from Professor Alladi, by attending seminars and using math science library. In fact, from AC College to math science, that walking distance is not optimum. So I have to buy a bicycle for this purpose in those days. There were no buses in those days. The seminars were very much useful and gave me exposure to theoretical physics. Listening to Professor Alladi gave me the confidence and much encouragement. The library had and continues to have excellent collection of books and journals, and in those days one Mr. Vincent, librarian, managed it very efficiently. I remember once when Alladi entered the library, the present office section there, he was, talking loud to students. Mr. Vincent slightly changed the orientation of the board, silence please. That's all he did it. And when I was an MSc student at St. Joseph's College, Tiruchi, names such as Schiff, Dirac, those names created an aura of celebrities, and it was a revealing experience to learn that these people visited math science, physically gave lectures and interacted with the students. That was a revealing experience for me. I joined math science as an assistant professor in 1977. Professor Alladi encouraged my research and strongly suggested that I should start working on high energy physics and quantum field theory, no more nuclear physics. He had a liking for me, partly for my long hours of work and being a national science talent search scholar, 1963 to 73, and university first in MSc physics. When I wrote my first paper in math science with my PhD student V.N. Sridhar on quenching of Cabibbo angle, Alladi asked me to send a copy to Professor Abdul Salam for his comments. Fortunately for me, Professor Salam responded writing a fine piece of work. The Math Science Conference gave me opportunity to speak about my work, and I got benefited from them. In 1980, I was promoted to associate professorship and started learning electroweak gauge theory, first by reproducing the epoch-making paper of Steven Weinberg, 1967, on theory of leptons. Soon I was working with the Professor K.S. Viswanathan on QCD using background field method. In 1983 August, I gave a seminar at Math Science on the ground state of SU2 Yang-Mills theory. Professor Rajasekaran, an expert in high energy physics, came from the University of Madras for my talk, and this created an impression on Alladi that I was doing good work. Professor Alladi retired in September 1983. I remember that day. It was evening 7 p.m. the director's office, he handed over the charge to one Mr. D.D. Sundarraj, Education Secretary, Government of Tamil Nadu, and left. We felt very sad and bad as there was no felicitation at that time, no words spoken for a person who created the great institute and guided for 2 decades. We had a new director, Professor George Sudarshan, and a joint director, Professor G. Rajasekaran. I continued my research on non-perturbative QCD. In 1986, there was an international symposium on theoretical physics at the University of Madras, and I gave an invited talk on ground state of QCD, demonstrating the existence of gluon condensate. The next day, Professor M.K. Banerjee of Maryland, in his opening transparency, alluded my previous day's results, and that gave me a moment of immense satisfaction. With my PhD student Prem Kumar, who is no more, studied neutral current neutrino reactions in carbon-12, and this work was quoted by Corman experimental group, the first detection of neutrino neutral current excitation in carbon-12. I started reading Kaluza-Klein theory and still continue to understand its implications without compactification. With Rajasekaran, we explained Berry phase using Kaluza-Klein idea with a parameter space as an extra dimensional space, and this work was liked by Professor S. N. Biswas. Professor Sudarshan, besides encouraging my work on Kaluza-Klein theory, listened patiently my derivation of Gribov ambiguity many times, and Professor V. Srinivasan was present on these occasions. I was benefited much by discussing this with Professor C. S. Seshadri, since it involved differential geometry and homotopy theory. On one occasion, when I explained my work to Professor Seshadri, after 40 minutes, he said it is trivial. I was taken aback. But then he explained it is a trivial bundle. What you are doing is a trivial bundle. This was published in 1987, and after 15 years, Austrian math physicist has referred to this and a few others also. The years 89 to 95 was spent on generalized Gauss map and their relevance to QCD, and in 1991, with the Professor Vishwanathan, we proposed the Q fermions, which are the counterparts of Q bosons. In 1997, I became Professor G, and in 2005, Professor H. During my ending days, Dr. Alok Kumar joined me for his PhD. Why I am saying this is the student support is very essential for doing research. That's my opinion. We examined the chromomagnetic instability of CVD vacuum and showed that when the cubic and quartic terms in the quantum fluctuations were retained, the unstable modes, there was no instability. Thus, a stable chromomagnetic vacuum exists not only at 0 temperature but also at finite temperature. So a difficulty that plagued for nearly 30 years have been resolved. Now I briefly touch upon what I call quasi-academic experience. Professor, 1 minute. Professor Sridhar was mentioning the disciplined outlook of Alladi on the conduct in the institute. I give you an anecdote. He was a monumental personality, never compromised on quality. He encouraged new ideas. He was very strict on cleanliness of the campus. When a visitor from Europe, during his seminar, putting his shoe on the wall like this, reclining, he went out and brought a peon to wipe the wall. The visitor apologized. Professor Alladi was proud of math science reports. You see many such reports of eminent physicists and mathematicians. After I joined SC College, he brought Professor Hans Bethe in 1970 for a course of lectures on nuclear matter theory. And Professor Srinivasa Rao, G.N.S. Prasad and myself took notes, and that was never published. I don't know why. Okay. Professor Sudarshan gave new life to the institute, both by way of expansion and academic brilliance. From the days of writing articles, typing, filling up the equations with the figures drawn by Mr. Sambandam of crystallography department, and sending the manuscript by post, to using Kyrite and now using tech. The technology has improved the working of physicists and mathematicians. I had very good friends I continue to have, Professor R. Vasudevan, N.R. Ranganathan, V. Radhakrishnan, the first two are no more, Professor K. Srinivasa Rao, Sridhar, Jagannathan, Simon, Ramesh Anishetty, Rahul Basu, Ganashyam Date. They have significantly contributed to my career and I enjoy discussing with them. So I have very sweet memories of my stay in math science. Thank you very much.